Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. Tonight, we leave behind the noise of the modern world to immerse ourselves in a story of honor, sacrifice, and resilience that continues to inspire hearts across the globe. Have you ever wondered what it means to give your life for a cause, even knowing that death is certain? If you seek strength to face your own battles, this journey is made for you. Tonight, I will tell you the complete story of Leonidas, the King of Sparta, who became a legend by confronting the most powerful empire of his time. We will discover his childhood, hardened by discipline, his unexpected ascent to the throne, and the decision that would forever mark his destiny: to lead 300 warriors to certain death with the sole purpose of defending freedom. It is a true story, yet it seems written by the gods. During this journey, you will hear about the secrets of Sparta, the harsh trials of the Agoge, the political tensions with Persia, and the mystique surrounding the pass of Thermopylae. This is not merely a story of war, but a reflection on courage, duty, and what it means to be remembered for eternity. Here, there is no fantasy, only truth transformed into myth through time. If you are tired from heavy days and restless thoughts, this story will bring you calm, perspective, and a sense of grandeur that goes beyond sleep. As your mind relaxes and your eyes close, each word will lead you along ancient paths, among shadows of shields, spears, and oaths that still resonate in the soul of the world. Let the voice of history envelop you tonight. And if this experience helps you find peace or inspiration, consider following this channel and becoming a member. Members receive early access to every narrated journey like this, as well as exclusive stories for those who want to explore the mysteries of the past in depth. Now, prepare to sleep, listening to the complete story of Leonidas. Chapter 1. The birth of a Spartan king. In the heart of the Peloponnese, surrounded by mountains that seemed to guard an ancient secret, stood the city of Sparta. There, every birth was not simply the arrival of a new being, but a matter of state. Leonidas came into the world in a turbulent time where the gods were feared and valor was the only currency of respect. He was not greeted with royal celebrations, for he was not the firstborn. He was just another son in a city that measured life with rigor. From his very first breath, Leonidas was subject to the judgment of the Spartan elders, who decided if a newborn deserved to live. His body was examined with a severe gaze, searching for signs of weakness or deformity. But the child, though not remarkable in size or strength, showed a firmness in his gaze that did not go unnoticed. He was accepted into the community, destined to follow the same path as all Spartans, to serve the polis with body and soul. Unbeknownst to him, he had already passed his first test. Leonidas was the son of King Anaxandridas II, but not the expected heir. His mother did not belong to the king's first wife, but to a second union approved to ensure offspring. This placed him in a marginal position within the royal family. While his half-brothers were prepared for politics and command, he was raised with austerity, like any other citizen. He had no privileges, and that lack of special treatment forged his character silently and firmly. He was a prince without a throne. The Sparta of that time did not allow excessive ambitions or marked individualities. Everything was subordinated to the common good, and that included the sons of kings. Leonidas grew up knowing he had to earn every step, every respect, every glance. His lineage guaranteed him nothing, and that made him different from an early age. While others relied on their noble birth, he clung to duty and effort, and that seed planted in childhood would powerfully blossom when destiny called him. The entire city was a living temple of duty, and young Leonidas's life was intertwined with the rhythms of a militarized society. From a young age, he heard stories of heroism in war, songs that extolled sacrifice, legends of ancestors who fell with spears in hand. He did not dream of riches or power. He dreamed of living up to his people. With each passing year, it became clearer that his will was stronger than his position, and that distinguished him. In his childhood training, Leonidas showed stubbornness. He didn't always win. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he never gave up. This attitude began to draw the attention of instructors who saw in him a constant flame. Many ignored him due to his secondary origin, but some wise men watched him in silence, as one who senses a common stone holds a hidden diamond. No one said it aloud, but his mettle was different. There was something in him that would not bend. The early years passed, marked by discipline and repetition. Leonidas rarely spoke of himself, and when he did, it was with humility. He did not seek recognition, only to progress in what Sparta demanded of him. It was easier to notice his presence by what he endured than by what he said. Physical pain did not deter him from his goals. Taunts, when they came, vanished before his unwavering gaze. That silent resilience was his deepest hallmark, and no one could take it from him. His family, though royal, maintained a distant relationship with him. Important decisions were made beyond his reach, and he accepted that without resentment. From a young age, he understood that greatness is not inherited, it is built. He observed his brothers with respect, but also with serene determination. He knew his path would not depend on alliances or titles. It would be sculpted with blood, sweat, and obedience. Unlike others, he did not desire power, he desired to deserve it. The Oracle of Delphi, whose words were heard with reverent fear, had predicted dark times for Greece. Leonidas, though still young, seemed to absorb that atmosphere of foreboding. There was something in his silence that recalled the great warriors of the past. He did not need to prove anything yet, but he already walked as if he carried the weight of duty. In him, there was no arrogance or anxiety, only patience, endurance, and a deep respect for what was to come. Spartan education was not concerned with feelings. Affection was scarce, and tenderness a rarity. But in that harsh environment, Leonidas found his place. The right roughness molded him like stone molds a river. Every blow, every correction, every icy dawn in training was part of his silent formation. He did not protest, did not question, he simply moved forward. His spirit was a constant ember that never extinguished, even when it seemed invisible to others. Many years later, when his name would be spoken for generations, few would remember those inglorious days. But it was there, in the obscurity of ignored childhood, where the king began to be born, not on a throne, but in the dust of training grounds, not with applause, but with scars. Leonidas, the warrior who would defy an empire, was first an ignored child. And it was precisely that which made him strong, because he learned to rely only on himself and his duty. Thus, unknowingly, the child no one noticed slowly became Sparta's silent hope. While others boasted, he observed. While others sought recognition, he prepared. And though history had not yet written his destiny, the spirit of the king already beat within him. Leonidas was born without a crown, but with the soul of a leader. His time would come, and when it did, the world would remember him forever. Chapter 2. Childhood forged by iron. Leonidas's childhood unfolded amidst rough stones, firm commands, and the constant sound of martial training. In Sparta, children were not raised for pleasure or play, but for war. Every day was a lesson in obedience, endurance, and silence. Laughter was scarce, comfort non-existent. His childhood was a forge where the heat came not from the sun, but from daily sacrifice. From a very young age, Leonidas learned to do without the unnecessary. He slept on thin mats, ate just enough, and accepted pain as part of his growth. Hunger was not a punishment, but a tool to strengthen character. Spartan instructors offered no comfort, only demands. And he, far from breaking, absorbed every lesson with the concentration of one who knows that life grants no second chances. Unlike other children who dreamed of games or adventure stories, Leonidas lived in a raw, disciplined present. Affection was replaced by shouts of correction and harsh glares. Even among his peers, competition was fierce. Each sought to excel, to resist, to survive. But Leonidas did not compete out of pride, but out of conviction. Every exercise he performed with the certainty that destiny demanded something greater from him. He was often assigned hard tasks like carrying stones or training in rain and cold. While others quietly complained, he accepted everything with seriousness. His body slowly hardened, but what grew most within him was his will, the will not to retreat, not to yield to fatigue or fear. His strength was not evident in his muscles, but in the gaze he kept fixed, even when he fell to the ground exhausted. Mentors began to notice that this silent boy possessed something that could not be taught. His determination did not stem from a desire to please, but from an inner fire that burned ceaselessly. When he failed, he blamed no one. When he won, he did not boast. He lived to surpass himself, not to be seen. That attitude aroused respect among some and disdain among others, but he cared little. He knew the path of iron was solitary. During festivals, when others enjoyed brief moments of joy, he remained thoughtful. He liked to observe the elderly warriors, listening to tales of past campaigns, not out of nostalgia, but to learn. Every story was a seed in his mind, every scar a lesson. Even as a child, he thought like an adult, understanding that glory is not achieved by shouting, but by silently enduring, step by step. One of the moments that marked his childhood was when he had to face a day of survival alone in the nearby mountains. He had to find food, protect himself from the cold, and return without help. Leonidas not only completed the mission, but he did so without showing fear or weakness. When he returned to camp, his clothes were dirty and his body wounded, but his face remained serene. He did not seek recognition. He had simply done what he considered right. In hand-to-hand training, he was not the most skilled, but he rarely gave up. He fell and rose again and again. That stubbornness also began to shape his companions. Some were irritated, others inspired, but no one could ignore him. His perseverance was like a stone that does not easily break. He needed no words. His conduct was his language, a language of discipline and steadfastness. On cold nights, when others shivered or cried in secret, Leonidas observed the starry sky. Sometimes he wondered if the ancient heroes watched him from above. He had no certainties, only intuitions. But those solitary nights reinforced his connection with something greater, with an idea of destiny, of purpose. He did not dream of personal glory, but of serving his people in the best possible way. The harshness of the environment did not extinguish his spirit. It tempered it. He did not become cruel, but just. He did not become arrogant, but firm. He learned when to speak and when to be silent, when to strike and when to hold back. His precocious maturity was not the result of chance, but of every trial he had faced without surrender. His childhood had no tenderness, but it had purpose. In the eyes of the world, he was still just one among many, but within him something grew in silence. A quiet strength, an uncommon clarity of mind. He did not seek leadership, but his companions began to follow his example. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Iron not only forged his body, but also his spirit, and that silent essence prepared him for what was yet to come. Thus, Leonidas's childhood became a chain of constant challenges. There was no room for weakness or rest, only effort, pain, and learning. And among those trials, without anyone proclaiming it, a warrior was born, one who needed no titles because his soul already spoke for him. Leonidas, though young, was already part of Sparta's indomitable soul. Chapter 3. The Agoge and Unrelenting Discipline. At 7 years old, Leonidas was torn from his home and thrown into the Agoge, the most severe training system in ancient Greece. Lineage or wealth mattered not. All Spartan males passed through this crucible. It was a rite of transformation that separated the weak from those destined to protect Sparta. From the very first day, they were taught to endure pain, master fear, and yield to absolute obedience. The soul was forged to the rhythm of sweat, cold, and constant vigilance. Instructors showed no compassion. They observed with cold eyes, awaiting the slightest error to impose exemplary punishment. Discipline was not only physical, it was also mental. A warrior had to learn to control his mind as much as his body. Emotions were seen as weaknesses that could cost one's life on the battlefield. Leonidas, who had already known hardship in his childhood, found in the Agoge a natural environment where his virtues began to stand out. Youngsters were grouped into units, and within them, intense rivalries developed. Stealing food was part of the training, but if caught, the punishment was severe. This taught cunning and precision. Leonidas was never the fastest or the strongest, but he excelled in his quiet intelligence. He knew when to move, when to be silent, and above all, when to act. His presence became increasingly respected, though he did not seek attention. During training, they were pitted against each other without clear rules. Blows, grappling, and falls were common. Bleeding was part of learning. Pain became commonplace, like air or water. Leonidas did not shy away from combat, nor did he fight to prove superiority. His gaze remained fixed on an ideal: to be useful to his city. While others boasted of their victories, he focused on improving daily in silence. Elders supervised from afar, looking for those who possessed not only strength, but temperament. Sparta did not need bullies. It needed men capable of dying for their brothers. Leonidas learned to form bonds with his companions, to care for them as if they were his own blood. Brotherhood was as important as the spear. Those who excelled individually but failed in unity were discarded. Collectivity was everything. Within the Agoge, intellectual training was also included. They learned music, poetry, and philosophy, but not as refinement, but as tools of discipline. Leonidas showed an inclination for reflection. He observed more than he spoke and remembered details that others overlooked. This capacity made him valuable. He was not just a strong body. He also possessed a mind that analyzed, a strategic mind not formed in books but in direct experience. Resistance to climate was another pillar. Under rain, wind, or scorching sun, they had to continue without complaining. Leonidas resisted without hesitation, as if every drop of sweat reaffirmed his determination. Sometimes, when others faltered, it was his example that reignited the group's will. Without raising his voice, his presence drove others. Leadership began to emerge, not through imposition, but through natural trust. Nights were cold and silent. They slept on hard ground with little cover and less food. But Leonidas did not lament. He knew that these privations were what would build his mettle. Every sunrise was a new combat, not against enemies, but against oneself. Sparta was not forged in battle, but in those small daily renunciations. His body became resilient, but his will was already indomitable. There was an episode where one of his companions was seriously wounded during training. While others hesitated, Leonidas carried him to the healers without faltering. That act did not go unnoticed. He sought no merit. He simply did what he considered right. That integrity began to be recognized. He was not just a good soldier. He was an example of honor. Respect for him was not imposed. It was earned through actions. The Agoge also included secret missions, stealth, and strategy tests outside the camp. Leonidas demonstrated great skill in moving unseen, in making decisions under pressure. These tests reinforced his confidence. Every obstacle overcome was another stone in the construction of his character. And although many ended up broken, he emerged ever firmer, as if every blow reaffirmed his purpose. Upon finishing the Agoge, few maintained their essence intact. Many became cruel or cold. But Leonidas preserved his balance. He knew when to be harsh and when to be just. His face reflected maturity, and his actions wisdom. He had been through hell and emerged with a tempered soul. Sparta had placed its trust in him, even without proclaiming it. His destiny was already shaping towards something greater. Thus ended his training, but not his learning. The Agoge taught that war is not only fought with weapons, but also with virtue. Leonidas emerged from that stage not as just another young man, but as a man who understood the weight of serving his city. Discipline became his shield, and though he still wore no crown, he already walked with the posture of a king. Chapter 4. Leonidas and the Crown of Sparta. Death always lingered around the kings of Sparta. Cleomenes III, Leonidas' half-brother, disappeared from public life amidst rumors of madness and suicide. His end, shrouded in uncertainty, left a void on the throne that could not remain unguarded. The city, proud and feared, needed a leader who would not only govern, but inspire. Leonidas, by right of blood and virtue, was called to embrace destiny. The crown was not a jewel that adorned, it was a burden that burned the brow of whoever wore it. Leonidas accepted it with the same solemnity with which he wielded a spear. He offered no speeches and sought no celebration. His first action was to reinforce the army's training and evaluate defenses. He knew peace was fragile, and a king's duty was to prepare for the storm, even if the sun still shone. The ephors, political leaders who shared power with the kings, observed Leonidas's first steps closely. They found him prudent, austere, and just. His leadership style was not authoritarian, but exemplary. He walked among the citizens, listened to the elders, and participated in religious rituals. His figure began to inspire confidence not only in the soldiers, but also in the Spartan people. Sparta's enemies watched from afar, hoping for internal divisions after the succession. But Leonidas closed ranks skillfully. He strengthened internal alliances, reinforced ties with Dorian allies, and kept opponents at bay. He never sought popularity, but his solid and just actions made him beloved. His past, as one of the common people, kept him rooted, humble, and focused on duty. In the war council, his words were few but accurate. He did not impose, he convinced. Veteran generals respected him for his history of discipline and courage. The younger ones followed him out of admiration. In times when kings usually distanced themselves from the battlefield, Leonidas trained alongside his men, slept with them, ate the same food. The crown on his head did not distance him from the earth. With the arrival of foreign ambassadors, especially from Asia, Leonidas displayed a mix of firm courtesy and contained distrust. He knew the world was changing, and that the Persian threat was growing like a distant shadow. In private meetings, he began to plan defensive strategies. Although no spears were yet raised, his soul already felt the vibration of the inevitable conflict. The Oracle of Delphi spoke in those days with dark words. Either Sparta would lose its king, or it would be destroyed. Leonidas listened to the prophecy calmly. He neither flinched nor showed fear. For him, it was already decided. If he had to fall to save his land, so be it. This resignation was not weakness, it was sacred determination. He understood that his destiny was tied to that of his people and accepted the sacrifice if necessary. Religious festivals were an essential part of the Spartan calendar, and as king, Leonidas actively participated. In them, he did not seek prominence, but to reinforce spiritual unity. He thanked the gods with sober words, aware that the destiny of men also depended on the invisible. His faith was not loud, but it was deep. He felt that his path had been marked since birth. As king, he also had judicial duties. He intervened in disputes with a sense of impartial justice, gaining even more respect from the population. He was firm, but not cruel. Whoever expected unmerited clemency did not find it. Whoever deserved a second chance received it. His judgment was that of a man who knew both hardship and compassion. Thus, a solid and dignified reign was built. In his home, he did not surround himself with luxuries. His wife Gorgo was a strong and intelligent woman, a loyal advisor and a voice of wisdom. Together, they formed a symbol of Spartan balance. She was not a shadow, but a beacon. Leonidas listened to her, trusted her judgment, and made many decisions with her by his side. In a land where women had a voice, Gorgo shone as a worthy queen of Sparta. The young saw in Leonidas a role model, the elders the fruit of a good education, and foreigners a leader difficult to bend. The city began to regain confidence in the face of external threats. Leonidas, though he never proclaimed himself a savior, had become the pillar that kept Sparta's structure erect. The crown did not change him, it only made more visible what he had always been. Thus his position was consolidated, not by imposition, but by example. He had not been born to reign, but every step had prepared him for that moment. Under his command, Sparta regained its mettle and unity. Peace reigned, but in the king's heart, war was already whispering. Leonidas was not a king of words, but of deeds. And when the time came to rise, he would do so, without hesitation, for his city and his destiny. Chapter 5. The Threat of the Persian Empire. In the vast lands of the East, an empire grew like an unstoppable ocean. Persia, under the command of Darius III and then his son Xerxes, extended its dominions like a shadow over the known world. Its armies were legion, its riches endless, and its ambition insatiable. For many peoples, the Persian advance was inevitable, but for Greece, it meant a direct threat to its freedom and culture. Years earlier, Darius had already tried to conquer Greece, but the defeat at Marathon still burned in his memory. The humiliation of that day was not forgotten by the Persians. Xerxes, his heir, swore revenge. With mountain-like patience, he prepared the most ambitious invasion ever conceived. An army like the world had never seen would be the empire's response. Greece would be subdued or destroyed. Rumors arrived like a cold wind in Sparta. Ships under construction, soldiers recruited, resources mobilized. The Hellespont would be crossed by floating bridges. The sky would be darkened by enemy arrows. Leonidas knew it was no exaggeration, but a close reality. The threat was not a possibility. It was a certainty approaching step by step with the rumble of millions of feet. In Athens, political debates divided citizens. In Sparta, the reaction was different. Danger caused not fear, but preparation. Leonidas summoned the ephors, generals, and wise men. The discussion was not whether to fight or not, but when and where. The spirit of Sparta did not accept surrender. Its sons were ready for war from the moment they could walk. The Persian threat was for them an opportunity for glory. Xerxes sent ambassadors to the Greek city-states, demanding their submission and tribute. In many, they were received with fear. In Sparta, their words found no echo. The laws of Lycurgus forbade negotiation under threat. In a fierce gesture, the ambassadors were thrown into a well. "This is how Sparta pays when Someone speaks of slavery," they said. The message was clear. There would be no pacts, only combat. The magnitude of the Persian Empire was overwhelming. Its ranks included soldiers from dozens of nations, Median archers, Babylonian spearmen, cavalry, a war machine whose force seemed unstoppable. Its generals spoke of victory with arrogance. They thought Greece would fall like other nations without much resistance. They did not yet know the determination of free peoples. Greek allies began to gather at the Isthmus of Corinth. The city-states set aside their old quarrels to face the common storm. Sparta led without imposing itself, because everyone knew they were the best in war. Leonidas, silent, observed every decision with his mind set on defending the Greek soul. His intuition told him that the confrontation was inevitable and brutal. News of the size of the Persian army chilled the blood of the bravest. There was talk of hundreds of thousands of men, perhaps more. The morale of some cities broke. But Leonidas repeated a simple truth: courage is stronger than numbers. Not everyone was convinced, but the king's words transformed into a banner for those who still believed in freedom. Despite the distance, Persian preparations could be felt in every corner of the Aegean Sea. Fleets advanced, ports were occupied. The threat was not only military, it was cultural, spiritual. The Persian Empire offered security in exchange for obedience. Greece, divided, had to choose between submission or resistance. For Leonidas, there was no choice. Only honor or disappearance existed. Xerxes relied not only on his troops, but on the fear he sowed. Every step of his advance was proof of his might. The gods were invoked by both sides, but destiny did not respond clearly. On Spartan nights, Leonidas contemplated the stars, knowing that his generation was destined to define the future. The time for words was over. The era of steel was approaching. The Persian threat was not just men and weapons, but a model of the world. Where Greece valued freedom, Persia imposed order by force. For the Spartans, that contrast was unbearable. They preferred to die fighting than to live under foreign yoke. Leonidas prepared his soul and his army. He knew he would face the impossible, but that did not stop him. It motivated him even more. Thus, under a sky darkening with omens of war, Sparta stood firm. Its shields were polished, its spears sharpened. Mothers prepared their sons to fight. The threat was real, and it was gigantic. But Leonidas' spirit already burned like a flame, and when the moment came, he would not hesitate to respond with fire, steel, and a cry for freedom etched in history. Chapter 6. The call to war news of the Persian advance spread like lightning among the Greek city-states. Councils met urgently, messengers ran ceaselessly, and alliances were discussed under the pressure of time. The threat was no longer a distant shadow, but a roar approaching, with steady steps. Greece had to act united or fall divided. In Sparta, the call to war needed few words. Duty was etched into the souls of its citizens from birth. Leonidas, aware of the gravity of the moment, rose as a symbol of resistance. He knew the enemy was superior in numbers, but inferior in spirit. Sparta did not flee. Sparta confronted. The Pan-Hellenic League met in Corinth to make crucial decisions. Each city had its pride, its history, its distrust. Athens viewed Sparta with suspicion and vice versa, but the common danger forged unexpected bridges. Leonidas did not speak much in the meetings, but his presence commanded respect. When he spoke, silence reigned. Discussions revolved around strategy, where to face them, who would lead, how to coordinate such disparate forces. The pass of Thermopylae was proposed as a defensive point, a narrow path between sea and mountain, where Persian numbers would lose their advantage. Leonidas understood it instantly. It was the perfect place to resist. Upon returning to Sparta, Leonidas meditated deeply. He knew this war was different. It was not just another expedition, but a battle for the soul of Greece. He chose his soldiers carefully, not for their strength, but for their character. Only the most committed would have the honor of marching. The decision was made with a burning heart and a cold mind. Sparta had strict laws about when to go to war, especially during religious celebrations. The ephors hesitated, auguries were consulted, but Leonidas, seeing the urgency of the situation, did not wait. He gathered 300 men from his personal guard. They were not simply soldiers, they were fathers, sons, brothers, warriors chosen for an eternal destiny. Every one of those men knew they would not return. There was no deception, only honor. Families bade them farewell with restrained tears and fierce pride. Mothers embraced their sons without fear, saying, "Come back with your shield or on it." It was a farewell of souls who understood the value of a just sacrifice. It was more than a war, it was an act of love for freedom. Leonidas also said goodbye. His wife Gorgo, strong as the mountains surrounding Sparta, looked at him with the firmness of a queen. She did not ask him to stay. She knew a king's duty was to fight for his people. Leonidas kissed her with the certainty that his name would live beyond centuries. The call to war had been heard. The 300 prepared without ceremony. They polished their shields, sharpened their spears, and left their homes in silence. In the temple, the gods were invoked with solemnity, but in their hearts burned a certainty more powerful than any prayer. They were not going to stop the war. They were going to face it with every fiber of their being. News of the Spartan departure reached other cities as an inspiring echo. Small contingents from other city-states offered to join. The Thespians, the Thebans, some Corinthians. They knew it would be a march to death, but they also knew that dying alongside Leonidas was to become legend. The call was not only military, it was spiritual. The group left Sparta under the scorching sun, advancing along dirt and rock paths. People watched them from the roads in silence. Some wept, others saluted with raised fists. The column advanced like an arrow shot by the gods. Nothing could stop it, neither fear nor doubt, nor the certainty of death. Thus began the march that would change the course of history. Leonidas led with a firm stride and a gaze of steel. He wore no crown or mantle, only his armor and his conviction. He was a king, not by birth, but by action. And he answered the call to war as only true kings can, with valor, determination, and eternal love for his land. Chapter 7. The March of the 300. The column of warriors advanced in silence, treading firmly on the sacred ground of Greece. Each step resonated like a war drum announcing something deeper than a battle, an unbreakable determination. Farmers stopped their work to watch them pass. Some bowed, others simply wept. It was like watching heroes walking towards their destiny. Leonidas spearheaded the march with the serenity of one who had already accepted his end. He showed no fear or fatigue, only resolve. His gaze was lost on the horizon, as if he already saw the field where history would be forged. By his side, the men marched as an extension of his will. No one spoke, but all understood. Days were long and dusty, nights cold and silent. They stopped only as needed to rest their bodies and nourish their souls. In the nocturnal camps, they shared stale bread and memories. Some wrote letters to their families, knowing they might never be delivered. Others simply watched the stars, searching for signs. The group was not alone. Warriors from other city-states began to join with firm strides and determined eyes. They had not been called, but they had understood the message. Sparta's courage had ignited a spark in their hearts. No one forced them, but all knew what was at stake. It was not just Sparta, it was Greece. As they advanced, the landscape changed. Imposing mountains surrounded them, and valleys opened like sacred corridors. Every day was an act of faith, every step a wordless prayer. Some villagers offered water, fruit, or simply blessings. There was respect, but also fear, not of the Spartans, but of the magnitude of the moment. Leonidas spoke little, but his words were etched into memory. "We are not martyrs," he said. "We are guardians of tomorrow." Around him, the soldiers nodded with the conviction of those who had chosen their path. Each had left something behind, a mother, a wife, a child, but they did not lament. Honor weighed more than nostalgia. The passage through the sacred lands of Delphi was especially symbolic. There, where the gods spoke to men, Leonidas paused in silence. He sought no prophecies or divine approvals. He no longer needed signs. His cause was just, and his path irreversible. In front of the temple, he bowed his head slightly, then he moved forward without hesitation. Along the way, youngsters looked at the Spartans with admiration. Some wanted to follow them, others simply imitated their steps. Elders recalled their own wars with melancholy, but no one dared question the sacrifice that was approaching. History was being written with the sweat of these men, and all knew there was no turning back. Their armor shone under the sun like mirrors of will. Their shields reflected more than light. They projected determination. Spears were extensions of the warrior soul, ready to pierce not only flesh but also oblivion. Every soldier walked with a straight back and a serene face. They were not just warriors, they were symbols. The camaraderie among them was silent but deep. They knew each other with a glance, without need for words. In every shared campfire, in every improvised training, bonds stronger than bronze were forged. They knew they would fight and fall together, and in that certainty, they found peace. No one was alone on that march. The sound of the sea began to be heard in the distance. They were near the Strait of Thermopylae, a narrow, dark place between mountains and water. There, history awaited to be sealed with blood. Leonidas did not change his stride. His gaze remained fixed forward, firm as ever. The moment was approaching, and all felt it in their chests. When they finally arrived, they stopped in formation. They looked at the narrow pass and understood its advantage. There, numbers would not matter. There, courage would be the most powerful weapon. Leonidas gave the order to prepare the ground, not with fear, but with hope, because they knew they were not fighting to live, but to never be forgotten. Chapter 8. Thermopylae, the Strait of Destiny. The pass of Thermopylae was a natural corridor flanked by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. Its narrowness made it an ideal fortress for a handful of determined warriors. There, Leonidas found the perfect place to confront the Persian giant. The wind blew strongly, as if the world itself held its breath. Everything was ready for the inevitable. The Spartans began to reinforce the terrain, building improvised walls with stones and logs. They did not seek to block the pass forever, but to resist long enough. Every stone placed was an act of defiance, a silent promise. They knew the Persians would arrive with thousands of soldiers, but they also knew that numbers would be useless there. The pass would equalize the forces. During the wait, the soldiers sharpened their weapons and repeated their exercises. Discipline did not relax, not even in the face of death. Leonidas walked the ranks, observing, correcting, encouraging. His words were few, but his presence said everything. He was not a distant king, he was one of them, ready to bleed and die like the rest. The silence of dawn was almost sacred. Only the sea, breaking against the rocks, could be heard. Some soldiers prayed in silence, others polished their shields. There was no fear on their faces, but an iron calm. They had come to accept their destiny, and that made them invincible. Thermopylae was not just a tactical trap, it was an altar. The first scouts announced the enemy's approach. Dust on the horizon, flashes of steel reflecting the sun. The Persians stretched like an endless mantle. Facing them, the 300 Spartans and some allies, all steadfast. There was no retreat, not even a hesitation. The decision had been made the moment they left Sparta. Xerxes, the Persian king, sent emissaries with offers of surrender. He promised wealth, lands, even life. Leonidas responded with a dry gesture. "Molon Labe, come and get them." The phrase traveled among the Spartans like a silent roar. It was not arrogance, it was conviction. That refusal was the purest declaration of war ever uttered. The narrow terrain prevented the Persian army from utilizing its numbers. They could only attack in small waves, and there the Spartans were masters. The pass became a bottleneck, and the Greek soldiers defended it with surgical precision. Every attack was repelled with firm shields and lethal spears. It was a deadly dance, perfectly rehearsed. Morale among the Persians began to falter. They could not understand how so few could resist so many. Bodies piled up at the entrance to the pass, and the air filled with screams and blood. Xerxes' soldiers, accustomed to quick victories, now felt the weight of Spartan pride. The strait had become a tomb. During the nights, the Spartans did not celebrate. They knew each day was borrowed. They tended their wounds, reinforced the wall, and shared silences. Leonidas spoke with the captains, adjusting strategies. There was no despair, only clarity. Every moment was maximized, every decision made with steel serenity. Some allies began to waver, seeing the magnitude of what was approaching. But the Spartans remained like rocks. Their mere presence instilled courage in others. Leonidas did not force them to stay. Every man was free to choose, and yet many chose to fight, because fighting alongside Leonidas was more than dying. It was transcending. The heat intensified, dust covered their faces, fatigue was constant, but no Spartan complained. Their training, their spirit, had prepared them for this moment. Every day of hunger, of punishment, of discipline now found its purpose. Thermopylae was their final field, and they defended it as one defends a heart. The Persians prepared a new attack, more brutal, more numerous, but the Spartans adjusted their ranks without fear. Thermopylae was no longer just a strategic location. It had transformed into a symbol, and the men who defended it into a living legend. There, between rocks and sea, a story was woven that eternity would never forget. Chapter 9. The Battle That Defied an Empire. The battle began with the thunderous roar of Persian drums marking the advance of thousands. From atop the narrow pass, the Spartans observed the movement with solemn calm. The ground trembled beneath their feet, but their hearts remained unshakable. Every soldier knew his position, his duty, his role in the dance of war. There was no room for error, only for glory. The first clashes were brutal, bodies hurled against impenetrable shields. Spartan spears found flesh with surgical precision. The enemy retreated only to be replaced by another, even more numerous group. Leonidas led from the front line, his spear cutting like thunder through the multitude. Every strike was a declaration. Sparta would not kneel. The Persians used archers to darken the sky with arrows. Darkness descended momentarily upon the pass, but the Spartans, with shields held high, formed a living wall. Barely an arrow found flesh. It was as if the gods themselves protected their hardened bodies. And when the arrows ceased, they advanced again, unstoppable. Xerxes watched from a distance, perplexed. He had promised a swift victory, a Greek humiliation that would consolidate his power. But what stood before him was a resistance that defied logic. How was it possible for so few to hold back so many? The Persian king was beginning to understand that he fought not only against men, but against an idea. Days passed, and the battle did not yield. The Persian ranks wore down while the Greeks remained solid. Other allied contingents reinforced the line, but it was the Spartans who set the pace. Their war cries, their ferocity were contagious. To every fall of a comrade, the others responded with renewed fury. The Persian strategy changed, resorting to the immortals, their elite guard. They were trained warriors, numerous and well-equipped, but even they were held back by the Spartan phalanx. Combat was close quarters, hand to hand. Sweat and blood mingled on the stones. Thermopylae was stained red, but the pass remained in Greek hands. At a critical moment, Xerxes attempted to outflank the position using hidden paths. He was betrayed by a Greek named Ephialtes, who revealed the secret way. The news reached Leonidas through exhausted scouts. The king showed no surprise or fear. He knew the end was near, but also that he still controlled the present. With the flank compromised, Leonidas gathered his generals. He could have ordered a retreat, saved what remained of his army. But he chose another path. He decided to stay, with his 300 along with some voluntary allies, to resist until their last breath. Not for victory, but for the message. Some men are greater than death. The battle became more desperate. The Spartans broke spears and used short swords, then fists, even stones. The combat was savage, primal, brutal, but still, they did not retreat. Every fall was a heroic act, every cry a testament to courage. In the midst of the chaos, Leonidas stood firm, like a beacon in the storm. Xerxes, furious, ordered a massive attack from all fronts. The pass became a sea of bodies, a field where titans of will confronted the weight of an empire. Blood covered the ground like an inexhaustible river, but even as they were surrounded, the Spartans fought as if eternity watched them. The last moments were slow and painful. Leonidas fell, surrounded by enemies not with fear but with dignity. His men formed a circle around him, protecting his body with their lives. The sun rose over a silent field covered in smoke and death. But among the ruins, something remained intact, the spirit of Sparta. The Persians took the pass, but they did not achieve moral victory. The entire world heard what happened at Thermopylae. It was not a simple battle, it was an eternal cry of resistance. That day, a handful of men showed that the soul is stronger than any army, and in that echo of steel and fire, the true legend of Leonidas was born. Chapter 10. The Fall of the King. Leonidas, surrounded by his men, was like a flame refusing to be extinguished. Though Persian forces advanced from all flanks, the king held his ground. Wounded, sweaty, and covered in blood, he did not cease to fight. His sword was chipped, his shield broken, but his will was unshakable. Every movement was a declaration of resistance against oblivion. The Persian soldiers, though numerous, hesitated in his presence. They had heard of Leonidas, but seeing him in combat was another matter. He was not simply a leader, he was a living symbol of valor. His eyes, burning with determination, spoke more than 1,000 speeches. In every thrust, there were centuries of tradition and pride. Finally, an enemy spear struck his side. The blow did not fell him, but his breathing grew heavy. The Spartans around him formed an even denser wall, preventing anyone from approaching. They knew what his life meant to everyone. They fought not just for victory, but to give their king a dignified death. Leonidas, sensing the gravity of his wound, looked to the sky with serenity. There was no resentment or fear, only acceptance. For a Spartan, to die in battle was the greatest honor, and for a king, to fall defending his people was a crown brighter than gold. His mind replayed memories of his childhood, his Agoge, his ascent. His last thoughts were for Sparta, not out of weakness, but out of love. He had given all he was for his land, body, soul, and destiny. In that instant, he understood that his death would not be an end, but a beginning. Every drop of his blood would sow courage in future generations. Leonidas closed his eyes and fell to his knees. The impact was silent, but it resonated like thunder among his men. The king had died, but his spirit burned with greater force. The Spartans, far from surrendering, entered a sacred frenzy. With cries that tore the air, they charged against the invaders. It was an act of farewell and vengeance, of love and rage. Leonidas's body was protected with devotion. No one could touch him without facing the fury of his warriors. Still, the Persian pressure was unbearable. Little by little, the Spartans were overwhelmed, but even in retreat, they did not abandon the king. Every step back was covered with blood. Every lost space was paid for with 10 enemies. Xerxes, observing the final resistance, ordered the king's body captured, not out of respect, but to break the Greek spirit. He knew that displaying it would be a psychological blow, but that decision only heightened the legend. Taking Leonidas's body was not a victory. It was a provocation to the free world. A martyr had been born. The Persians, after arduous efforts, seized the corpse. They brought it before Xerxes, who contemplated it in silence. He saw not a mere mortal, but a man whose death was worth more than 1,000 victories. His skin was torn, but his face still showed firmness. Leonidas seemed to sleep with eyes open to eternity. Xerxes, in his arrogance, ordered the body to be crucified. He wanted to erase his greatness with humiliation, but that vile gesture further fueled the flame of rebellion. The image of Leonidas, crucified yet upright, traversed the Greek lands. It was as if even in death he continued to lead. His defeated body could not conceal his glory. In Sparta, news of his fall was met with mourning and pride. Women wept, not out of weakness, but out of deep love. Elders spoke of him as one speaks of heroes. Children swore to emulate his example. The city did not sink into sadness, but was forged in new fire. Leonidas became an eternal ideal. The king's fall was not an end, but a turning point. He had shown that one man could defy an empire. His death did not break Greece, it united it. The city-states finally began to see themselves as sisters, all thanks to a king who chose to die standing. Leonidas fell, but his shadow rose over all of history. Chapter 11. The Immortal Legacy. Leonidas's death did not mark the end of his influence, but the birth of a myth. His sacrifice at Thermopylae transcended generations and borders. He was remembered not as a defeated man, but as an example of dignity. His name began to be spoken with reverence throughout Greece. Even his harshest critics acknowledged his greatness. In Sparta, Leonidas's legacy became a pillar of education. Young men were instructed not only in combat, but in the value of absolute devotion. His story was narrated in training and in homes, feeding the flame of duty. His figure was synonymous, with silent courage and resistance in the face of the impossible. He became a mirror for aspiring warriors. Poets transformed him into verse, sculptors into marble. The statues raised in his honor were not lavish but solemn. They represented a man standing tall, with a firm gaze, as if still protecting his land. The words etched alongside his image became an eternal cry. It was not an invitation to war, but to dignity. Philosophers used his example in their lessons on virtue. Leonidas personified arete, the moral excellence sought by the Greeks. His life and death offered a lesson on how to live with honor. He was not a thinker, but he taught more with his action than many with words. His legacy transcended the battlefield to touch the human soul. Even outside Sparta, Leonidas was adopted as a symbol. In Athens, where reason was adored, he was remembered as a guardian of freedom. In Thebes, where there had been conflicts with Sparta, his name generated respect. Peoples understood that his sacrifice was not only for his city, but for all of Hellas. He became a collective hero. Over time, Thermopylae transformed into a sacred place. Travelers came from distant regions to honor his memory. Some left offerings, others simply contemplated in silence. The strait was no longer just a geographical location, but a living scar of valor. The echoes of battle still seemed to resonate among the rocks. Historians began to compile accounts of his feat. Although some details, varied, the essence remained intact. A king who chose to die with his own rather than yield to the oppressor, a small number of men facing a colossal army. History acquired legendary dimensions, fusing reality and myth. The message Leonidas left was stronger than any decree. He taught that the free soul does not kneel to fear, that duty to justice is worth more than life itself, that true leadership is not imposed but earned by example. His name became a torch for those who face oppression. In him, the human touched the eternal. For centuries, leaders and generals cited his name. In times of war, his memory strengthened hearts. In times of peace, it recalled the price of freedom. Leonidas was more than a king. He was a moral compass. Where power threatened, his story recalled the value of resistance. His spirit crossed seas and ages. Even the enemies who faced him could not deny him respect. In Persia, some accounts spoke of his bravery as an admirable rarity. His figure was studied by strategists of various cultures. His death was not useless. It sowed a seed of rebellion. The memory of the 300 became a symbol of defending home and honor. In modernity, his name revives every time justice is defended. In books, films, and speeches, Leonidas continues to fight. His figure transcends Sparta's borders to speak to all humanity, because his message was not just Spartan, it was universal. His legacy does not rest in tombs, it lives in every brave heart. Thus, Leonidas did not die at Thermopylae. He was reborn forever in history. His body was defeated, but his essence became immortal. Every generation finds in him a mirror of dignity and courage. The echo of his steps still resonates in those who fight with conviction. Leonidas lives where freedom is defended without fear. Chapter 12, Sparta. After Leonidas's death at Thermopylae, Sparta did not succumb to mourning, but to a firm resolve. The city further strengthened its discipline and hardened its customs. Sober monuments were erected commemorating the sacrifice, not as lament, but as inspiration. The Spartans swore never to forget the blood shed by their king. The memory of Leonidas became a silent flame. The war against the Persians continued, and Sparta played a crucial role in subsequent confrontations. Notably, the Battle of Plataea. The Spartans led the Greek forces to a decisive victory. Their courage and discipline proved fundamental to the invaders' final defeat. Although glory was shared, many saw Sparta as the heart of the Hellenic effort. Its reputation as invincible warriors was consolidated. However, fame brought with it tensions with other Greek city-states, especially Athens. While Sparta valued order and tradition, Athens flourished in art and thought. This difference in ideals gave rise to prolonged conflicts, culminating in the Peloponnesian War. Sparta won, but the cost was high for all of Greece. The ruins left by the conflict eroded Hellenic unity. Sparta maintained its militaristic system and rigid structure for centuries. Its society continued to be based on austerity, obedience, and service to the homeland. New kings had to live up to Leonidas's legacy. Young men still followed the Agoge, and honor marked every step of their lives. Nothing changed, because to change was to betray the glorious past. Nevertheless, the winds of the ancient world began to blow stronger. The rise of Macedon under Philip and then Alexander the Great shook the ancient city-states. Sparta, reluctant to adopt new tactics and open itself to the world, began to fall behind. Although still respected, it lost influence to more adaptable powers. Leonidas's spirit lived, but its walls began to crack. During Roman domination, Sparta was treated with almost ceremonial respect. The Romans admired its history, its toughness, and its discipline. Julius Caesar and other leaders visited it with curiosity, walking through the ruins of its training grounds. But what they found was a faded echo of the ancient power. Sparta had become more of a symbol than a real force. Sparta's political structure eventually collapsed, and the city transformed into a shadow of itself. The few remaining citizens lived among ruins, remembering past glories. They were no longer feared or led armies, but songs and legends kept the memory alive. Sparta became a pilgrimage site for history lovers. Despite its decline, the Spartan spirit left an indelible mark on Western civilization. The idea of sacrifice for freedom, of duty above fear, lives on. Military academies study its discipline, philosophers its philosophy of duty. In schools and forums, its name still inspires debate and admiration. They did not disappear, they transformed into ideals. In modern times, Sparta was reborn as a cultural symbol. Its image was rescued by literature, cinema, and art. Books and films popularized its history to new generations. Although some representations are idealized, they keep the flame of heroism alive. Leonidas's figure re-emerged as a universal icon of resistance. Tourism also brought life back to the region where Sparta stood. Visitors from all over the world walk among the ancient stones, searching in the dust for traces of the courage that once defied empires. Local museums preserve weapons, shields, and artifacts that speak of the past. History does not sleep there. It breathes among the olive groves. Sparta's lessons resonate beyond combat. They teach about leadership, conviction, and community. In new environments, an era where everything changes quickly, the example of steadfastness is refreshing. It is not about glorifying war, but valuing integrity. Sparta remains a reminder that honor can outlast power. Thus, Sparta, after Leonidas, was not simply a city in decline. It was a torch passed from hand to hand, illuminating ideas that survive to this day. Although its walls fell, its legacy remains. Sparta ceased to be a physical place, to become a symbol, and as long as there are those who believe in valor, Sparta will never die. Chapter 13. Curiosities and Secrets of the Eternal Warrior. The Spartans did not use gold or silver coins, unlike other Greek cities. Instead, they used iron bars, which made corruption and unnecessary trade difficult. This choice sought to foster self-sufficiency and rejection of luxuries. The Spartan economy was simple, focused on sustenance and war. Wealth was measured in military valor and discipline. The famous red cloak worn by the Spartans was not a symbol of elegance, but a strategy. Its color concealed bloody wounds on the battlefield, keeping morale firm. Furthermore, it represented blood and permanent sacrifice. Every soldier carried his cloak with pride and gravity. It was not simple cloth. It was a mark of identity. Long hair, contrary to expectation, was a symbol of nobility among the Spartans. They let it grow as a sign of bravery, as it was said that only the brave could afford such a luxury. In battle, they braided it carefully before facing the enemy. It was a ritual of spiritual and physical preparation. Appearance was part of their martial character. Unlike other cities, in Sparta, women enjoyed unusual rights. They could own land, receive education, and participate in debates. They trained physically because they believed that strong women bore strong children. Motherhood was considered a sacred duty to the homeland. Their role was fundamental in sustaining the warrior nation. One of the most impactful practices of the Spartan system was the selection of newborns. Every baby was examined by elders to determine its health and strength. If it did not meet the standards, it was abandoned on Mount Taygetus. Although inconceivable today, in their logic, they sought to preserve the physical purity of the community. It was the law of the fittest from birth. The Spartans feared not death, but cowardice. Abandoning one's shield was considered the worst dishonor, as it meant fleeing. That's why mothers told their sons, "Come back with your shield or on it." It was a clear message. Valor was superior to life itself. They preferred to die with honor than to live without it. The Agoge, the Spartan educational system, was one of the toughest in history. Children lived in communities from the age of 7, away from their families. They slept on rushes, ate little, and suffered constant physical punishments. They were taught to endure pain, hunger, and fear. Only the most tenacious reached adulthood. The Krypteia was one of the final phases of Spartan training. Young men were sent into the countryside to survive alone, without help. They had to hide for days, spy on enemies, and steal food without being discovered. Some even killed helots, slaves, as a test of stealth. It was a brutal preparation for real war. The law of silence dominated this rite. The Spartan army was organized into phalanxes, compact blocks of shields, and spears. Each warrior protected the one to his left with his shield, symbolizing unity. If one fell, the entire front weakened. This reinforced comradeship and mutual loyalty. There was no room for individualism in battle. The Spartans spoke little and with short phrases, thus giving rise to the term laconic. This form of communication avoided rhetoric and focused on action. A wise silence was preferable to empty words. Spartan philosophy valued sobriety in every aspect. Their language reflected their life, direct, firm, and unadorned. One of the lesser-known secrets is that Sparta had no walls. Its leaders believed that the courage of its men was the best defense. It is said that King Agesilaus stated, "Our walls are our spears." This decision reflected absolute confidence in their army. It was a clear message to friends and enemies alike. Finally, although Sparta fell, it was never forgotten. Its history inspired entire generations of warriors, leaders, and thinkers. In it, they found an image of absolute sacrifice and fidelity to ideals. Every hidden curiosity behind its history reveals an eternal principle. Sparta was not just a city, it was a spirit that defies time.